We're now about to begin the second excellent panel of the Korea Conservative Political Action Conference, which, as you may know, had its inaugural event in Seoul last October. And some of these august individuals participated in that great event. I would like to first ask you to hear a short greeting from the Executive Director of KCPAC, Dr. Andrew Crilly.
Thank you very much indeed, thank you. It is an honor and a pleasure to have such an esteemed panel to discuss these matters. We could not have done better today if we planned it for months, but in fact I know a lot of you came at short notice, so thank you very much indeed. It's going to be a wonderful discussion. We couldn't have a better audience we could not have a better audience to listen to your wonderful comments. So without further ado, let's get on with the discussion. Thank you very much once again on behalf of KCPAC.
Thank you very much, Dr. Crilly. My name is Lawrence Peck. I'm a West Coast representative of KCPAC, an advisor to the North Korea Freedom Coalition, and I will be the moderator and questioner for today's excellent panel. The topic of which is, this afternoon, the threat of Communist China and North Korea to the United States, the Republic of Korea, South Korea, and our other allies. And as you can see, we have a wonderful panel lined up for you. At the far end is Patrick Kang, who is the director of KCPAC, and he'll be serving as the translator, if necessary, of some of our Korean participants. He had worked in the State Department, and now, as I mentioned, he is the director of KCPAC. Thank you, Patrick. I'll now introduce the panelist guests. Immediately to my left here is a guest who's joining us from Korea, Ambassador Cho Tae-young, who was a deputy director of the South Korean Presidential Office of National Security and vice foreign minister under the conservative pro-American administration of former President Park Geun-hye. He served as ambassador of South Korea to Australia and Ireland, and he was special representative for the Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs and chief of protocol, as well as director general for North America and North Korea nuclear issues within the South Korean government. Next to Ambassador Cho is an individual you probably recognize if you ever watch Fox News, and that is Gordon Chang, who has been an attorney and is a well-known columnist and Fox News commentator, who has published several books on East Asian affairs and is an expert on those types of topics. And he also happens to be an ACU Foundation board member. So we'll all give a big hand to welcome Gordon. Next in line is Mr. Matthew Whitaker, who of course is also an attorney and well known for being a U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Iowa at the early stages of a career, and then became chief of staff to the U.S. Attorney General, subsequently acting Attorney General in the Trump administration, and finally, most recently, U.S. Associate Attorney General in the Trump administration, a senior consultant, I should say, to the U.S. Associate Attorney General in the Trump administration. So we're honored to have Mr. Whitaker. Next to Mr. Whitaker is another guest we have from my home state out in California, Mr. John Cha, who's a commentator and writer on South Korean politics. He happens to be an award-winning translator of Korean literature and poetry into English, and he's a biographer of several U.S. and ROK leaders. He's also a board member of the Intercultural Institute of California. Welcome, Mr. Cha. And finally, on the far left, and not ideologically speaking, of course, we have former two-star general retired Han Song-ju, president of the Korea Recovery Coalition, who is currently in the thick of political activism in Korea. He was in charge of Air Force Logistics Command, and he has a particular specialty researching the existence of North Korean infiltration tunnels into the South. So welcome, General. We'll begin now with our thread, and the first question I would like to pose to all of the panelists, or any who would like to comment on this particular issue, is what new or other steps should the United States now take in order to secure the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of North Korea? And we can start perhaps from this side with Ambassador Cho.
Well, North Korean nuclear issue has bedeviled us for 3 or 4 decades already, and there have been many attempts at trying to resolve this issue through pressure and through negotiations. Unfortunately, and all these attempts have not been successful, and today we are facing a North Korea with a completed and workable nuclear bombs and warheads, and also an array of means of delivery from short, medium, to possibly long-range missiles. And they are also developing the submarine-launched the ballistic missile as well. So we are talking about a full package here. And North Korea is now a threat, not only to my country, but also to Japan and the United States. So this is a serious moment in our attempts at trying to resolve this North Korean nuclear issue. Having said that, now that North Korea inscribed into their constitution and the party stature that North Korea is an indeed nuclear weapons country. So that means trying to win these weapons away from North Korean hands will be all but impossible. These extraordinary times and challenges, of course, require extraordinary actions on the part of peace-loving nations, including South Korea. And I applaud President Trump in luring Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader and sole decision maker on this issue, into the negotiating table. Yes, in the process, Kim Jong-un was given certain stature and legitimacy in the international arena. Sitting down with American president has been a dream of North Korean leaders. But this was not for free. And Kim Jong-un now can be held personally and directly responsible if North Korea does not denuclearize. And the United States and Trump administration have done a lot already. They, in cooperation with other countries, put together a strongest ever sanctions regime over North Korea. I'm not saying this is perfect, but it's the strongest ever. So it is effective. How effective? I'll give you one number. In 2013, in Goodyear, North Korea's export to China, by the way, over 95% of North Korea's external trade is conducted with one country, that's China. And North Korea's professed ideology is 주체, self-reliant. So I don't really make the connection here, because if you are professing to be self-reliant, but you are dependent upon one country for over 95% of your external trade, can this country be called self-reliant? It's very ironical. In any way, so in 2013, the North Korea's export to China was over $3 billion. Now the export went down to less than $200 million. Yes, there are illegal border trade, ship-to-ship illegal transfer of some goods, but this is not nearly enough to make up for the lost income for North Korea. So Kim Jong-un's coffer is being emptied, and there's a very serious concern in the minds of Kim Jong-un. It happened for the first time, and only because international community under the leadership of the United States got together and put together a very stringent and effective sanctions regime, something we'll have to remind. The task, I think, is to implement these sanctions strictly. Unfortunately, the implementation of the sanctions were more strictly 2 years ago than this year. So I hope that United States government and my government, Japanese government and other governments get together and made more efforts to make these sanctions really being implemented and really put pressure on China and Russia to really implement these sanctions. This is something very, very important. When this happens, then perhaps, very difficult still, but perhaps Kim Jong-un might be forced to come out to talk to the international community about nuclear weapons again, and we might have a better chance to really force Kim Jong-un to choose between a certain prospect of economic demise and very slim chance of taking nuclear weapons away from the hands of North Korea. So more stringent implementation of sanction is, I think, call of the day.
Thank you.
I certainly agree with Ambassador Cho that there needs to be more effective sanctions enforcement. If we go back to the middle of 2018, the United States had cut off about 50% of the flow of international cash to the regime, but then decided not to sanction almost 36 Chinese, Russian, and other front companies. And because Kim Jong-un changes his front companies all the time, if you don't sanction the new ones, you're allowing the regime in Pyongyang to hollow out these measures. So my answer to Lawrence's question would be, first of all, as Ambassador Cho said, more effective sanctions enforcement. We know from Reuters that there is a draft UN panel of experts report that is now in the works, about to go to the Security Council, which showed, and I think it was something like $370 million of illicit transfers between North Korea and primarily China. Many of these were ship-to-ship transfers, which are themselves specifically prohibited by Security Council resolution. So it seems to me that someone's got to be financing these commodity sales, and that probably is Chinese banks that are handling this money, which means to me that the obvious answer to Lawrence's question is not only tougher sanctions enforcement on North Korea, but it's also going after the Chinese banks. We have watched Chinese banks, especially since the beginning of the Trump administration, continue to launder money through New York, a direct violation of federal law. Now, in June of 2017, the Trump administration declared a small Chinese bank, Bank of Dandong, to be a primary money laundering concern under Section 311 of the Patriot Act. That essentially meant it could no longer do business in dollars, which is a death sentence for a bank's international business. But we also know that all four of the China's big four banks have been handling money for Kim Jong-un, and the U.S. has imposed no penalty at all, no fines, no Section 311 designation. So this is just a question of U.S. law. I mean, if we have a money laundering law, we've got to enforce it, regardless of the policy implications. We did not allow Pablo Escobar to run money through New York. We should not be allowing the Chinese to do the same. So this is a question of political will, and the United States needs to do something. That sending of the signal to Bank of Dandong was completely ignored by Beijing. So now's the time to actually take a big Chinese bank down. Remember, I don't like the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, what people call the Iran nuclear deal. But the reason why Tehran was willing to come to the table was because the U.S. imposed multi-billion-dollar fines on European banks. In one case, and Matt should probably will correct me, but I think there was like a $9 billion fine on one particular bank. We should be doing the same thing to the Chinese. And if we don't want to fine the Chinese, I can sort of understand that, but then we should repeal Section 311 of the Patriot Act and all the other money laundering laws, because we have to enforce our laws.
Thank you very much. Pardon me for one moment, Mr. Whitaker.
Sure.
If you indulge me for a moment, I just wanted to announce that Katie Mcfarland is here and she'll be joining our panel. So I'd like to just sneak her in and introduce her before you
I just
begin.
want to apologize. I'm normally very on time. And Secretary Pompeo was speaking, and I wanted to wait until he came on the stage in order to
Well, I'll briefly introduce Ms. Mcfarland. She was on the national security staff in the Nixon administration, a research assistant in the Ford White House, worked as a Republican staff member of the House Armed Services Committee, was a speechwriter for the Secretary of Defense and a Pentagon senior spokesperson in the Reagan administration. She was a principal deputy to the Assistant Secretary of Defense. You've probably seen her as a commentator as well on Fox News in recent days and months. And most recently, she was Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump. So we can welcome her.
Hey, Lawrence, you
Again, I
forgot
apologize
the
for
most
being late.
important thing. KT Mcfarland is the author of an Amazon #1 book.
Signings and sales begin at 2 p.m. and you better come because they're going to sell out really fast because Mike Pence was leaving CPAC yesterday with one copy under his arm.
I was waiting for Ms. McFarland to plug her own book, which she could do far more better than myself. Of course, Gordon's pamphlet, Losing South Korea, is available at our booth downstairs in CPAC Central. I apologize, Mr. Whitaker. Please go ahead and give your remarks now.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I just want to say what an honor it is to serve with each one of these panelists, an impressive group with a lot of distinction and knowledge in this area. I want to point out specifically what an honor it is to always be on these panels with Gordon. He is really someone I look to when I want to know what I think about an issue. I look first what Gordon thinks about an issue. And this is the first time we've ever disagreed on something, was what he just said, which is the idea of repealing Section 311 of the Patriot Act. I think that's a bad idea. I think your point was we should use it. Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to be frank with everyone in this room, and that is North Korea is pretty much, and this, I hope this translates okay, a dog on a leash for China. And so we have to, the only way we will get North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons is for China to partner with the United States and all the other freedom-loving countries, and together with the Russians. I don't include them in the freedom-loving countries, but for the world to put the pressure on the Chinese specifically to have because let's be honest, North Korea only survives because of Chinese patronage. Their regime only survives because of the Chinese think it's a useful tool to disrupt and destabilize really the entire Pacific Rim. And so I want to be very frank that for me, especially as it relates to North Korea, we cannot have that discussion. And Gordon and I have talked about this before. We can't have that discussion without holding the Chinese accountable. And I think your point is well made to, and I've talked about this in different settings, and I talked about it this morning in a different context. But, fundamentally, if the Chinese want to be part of the first world order, of other countries that trade together, share information together, exchange citizens' ideas, then they're going to have to participate as a true first world country. And I don't see that happening. I have, and this is, if I could predict the future, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I would be playing the stock market or doing other things to make money. But I really do believe that unless the Chinese are willing to play by the rules, the international rules, and the international community, and really the rules that have made the world, that all ships have been rising on the rising tide of world trade and a common set of beliefs that Europe for a long time and the United States and many other countries have prospered under. Until China not just takes advantage of that, but also plays by those rules, I think that's when we're going to end up with a much better relationship, not only with China, but I think you will see quickly the North Korea problem go away and ultimately be denuclearized. I am pessimistic about that, and I'm sorry. I see really ultimately competing world superpowers, maybe not to the extent that we saw with the Soviet Union, but at the same time, the communist Chinese share a common doctrine with the former Soviet Union, and so I don't know why we would expect the outcome to be any different.
Well, I agree. First of all, I appreciate being on this panel with the distinguished panelists. Gordon.
Oh, cut it out.
Cut it out. But most of my comments will be based on the human rights for North Koreans, and we all the Ambassador Cho and Gordon and Matt addressed all the good points up to now. But I want us, U.S., to exploit weaknesses of Kim Jong-un and put more pressure on him. And one of these weaknesses is that he is no longer considered a god among North Korean people. And let me explain that a little bit about that. With the nukes, Kim Jong-un has been teaching or telling his people that with the nukes, everything will be resolved. I mean, he's been brainwashing, I guess that would be the more accurate term for it, brainwashing the people that once we are the nuclear nation, now we can succumb the U.S. to give us all the economic aid we want. And the North Korean people believed this until Hanoi. And when he came back from Hanoi, the people of North Korea was very disillusioned, and Kim Jong-un actually made a comment that he was only human. And this, I credit President Trump, the way he handled Kim Jong-un, and I see a lot of hope in that. I mean, President Trump is the first one who could actually talk with Kim Jong-un and excuse me, and got him to admit to the people in North Korea that he was not a god, and this was huge. And I think we want the U.S. to exploit this and talk to the people of North Korea and say, look, you know, this is not the way to go. And I mean, it's more complicated than, you know, what I'm proposing. But the people of North Korea are, like I said, disillusioned, and we need to help the people to realize that nuke is not very helpful. And a lot of them do realize that, you know, what are you going to do with the nukes? Can't eat them. Their primary concern is food, and like any other people. So that's what I wanted to throw out there, that we should exploit Kim Jong-un's weakness on that. Thank you.
Please, General.
저는 한국 공군 예비역 소장입니다. 지금 코리아 리커버리 코얼리션 대한민국 회복 연합의 대표로 있습니다.
Hello everyone. My name is Han Sang-ju. I am a former two-star general of the ROKAF, Korean Air Force, and I am spearheading the organization called Korean Recovery Coalition.
김정은이는 시진핑과 연합하고 문재인과 연합해서 북한을 핵 보유 국가로 만드는 노력을 이제까지 해왔습니다.
So Kim Jong-un has put so much effort to develop and possess the working nuclear warhead and devices along with Xi Jinping of China and Moon Jae-in in South Korea.
저는 트럼프 대통령의 회담을 통한 디누클리어라이제이션을 지지하지만 그것은 트럼프 대통령님의 본심일 수 없다라고 생각을 합니다.
So I heard President Trump saying that the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is absolutely necessary, and I agree with him, but I don't think that is absolute intent.
강명도 교수라고 2002년도에 귀순한 고위급 귀순자가 있습니다. 강명도.
There is an individual named Kang Myung-do who defected North Korea in 2002.
1월 중순쯤에 그가 방송한 내용을 우리가 주목할 필요가 있습니다.
And we probably need to pay attention to what he had to say while his message was being broadcasted.
김정은이가 크리스마스 선물을 트럼프 대통령에게 보낸다고 했는데 20일이 되도록 침묵하는 이유를 알았다.
He said he finally understood why there was no messages from Kim Jong-un after 20 days of the message saying that the United States will receive a very special gift on the Christmas day.
지금은 2달이 넘었는데 2달이 넘도록 크리스마스 선물을 못 보내고 있는 이유를 강명도 교수는 이렇게 얘기하고 있습니다.
So now it has been about 2 months since the Christmas and America still did not receive any surprise gift from North Korea yet. Now this is what Professor Kang Myung-do had to say about this.
시진핑이가 김정은에게 4월 15일까지 아무 도발도 하지 말고 기다려라 라고 지령을 내렸다는 것입니다.
He stated that Xi Jinping had ordered Kim Jong-un not to do anything until this April 15th of this year.
4월 15일은 대한민국의 총선 300명의 국회의원을 다 물갈이하는 총선이 있는 날입니다.
As you may know, April 15th is the general election or congressional election in South Korea, which would elect 300 congressmen in South Korea.
4월 15일 날 이해찬이라고 하는 정부 여당의 당 대표는 260석을 가져오겠다고 작년에 호언장담을 했습니다.
One of the party leaders, Lee Jae-kam, promised and declared that he would be able to win about 260 seats of the National Assembly.
그것은 300석 중에 86%에 해당되는 의석입니다.
So 260 out of 300 seats, that would equal to 86% of the congressional seat.
문재인이가 국가를 경제와 안보를 개판치고 있기 때문에 도저히 이룰 수 없는 86%의 수치입니다.
But this 86% seems to be impossible numbers because the current president Moon Jae-in has really messed up the economy and national security of South Korea.
그러나 중앙선거관리위원회를 시진핑과 김정은과 문재인 3자 동맹이 장악하고 있기 때문에 표 훔치기를 통해서 그것을 하겠다고 하는 공언입니다.
But allegedly, the Central Election Oversight Committee is being controlled by the Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in. So if it is suspected that they may do some type of illegal actions during the election, so that may be possible.
4월 15일이 되면 미국인과 한국인, 트럼프 대통령과 세계의 자유민주주의 리더들이 대한민국이 공산화되는구나 하는 것을 보는 날이 될 것입니다.
So I would dare say on April 15, maybe the all-American and Korean, and maybe the President Trump here in America may see that finally, well, at last Korea is becoming a communized somehow.
그때부터 이제 하나님의 방법이 가동할 것이라고 저는 믿습니다.
And I believe that that is the time when God, our dear Lord, had to take some type of actions that we cannot do.
따라서 북한의 핵 문제는 인간적인 방법으로가 아니라 하나님의 방법으로 그것이 해결될 줄로 믿고 저희들은 노력하고 있습니다.
So I believe that this denuclearization or the nuclear issues with North Korea is something that human people cannot handle really accurately. It is something that only God can solve.
결론적으로 말씀드리면 문재인을 끌어내고 박근혜 대통령을 복귀시켜서 종북 간첩단을 척결하면서 한미 동맹을 강화하는 그 방법이 최종적으로 도래될 것으로 믿습니다.
So in conclusion, I would dare say the Moon Jae-in had to step down, and former President Park Geun-hye has to be restored. And by restoring the strong reliance between the United States and Korea, that would be the only solution to resolve this denuclearization issues. Thank you very much.
I'm very interested to hear the quite different, I think, interpretations and analysis of everyone at this table. And rather than to repeat other things that others have said, I'd like to take it from a slightly different angle, which is what is the United States' interest in China and the People's Republic of China, and where might that relationship go, knowing that the relationship between the United States and Korea is really a subset or is affected greatly by the relationship between the United States and China, as is every relationship in the world. I do believe, and I know President Trump believes, that the U.S.-Chinese relationship is the most important one for the next 20 years. And getting it right, in the sense of avoiding conflict, is the priority certainly for us. Getting it right, however, and avoiding having the Chinese emerge from this period as the world's sole superpower is also to be avoided by us. And Trump, although he doesn't pay credit to Reagan, looks, I believe, and I worked for both men, so I know I'm quite familiar with the policies, that he looks at the relationship with China similarly to the way the United States and Reagan looked at the relationship with the Soviet Union, that the United States has an economic advantage, we have a technological advantage, and we have allies instead of vassals, which is all the Chinese have, and it's all the Soviet Union had. And that if we can first look out after our own interests with China, and that will be our priority, to get that one right, and that then all else flows from that. So I think that where the United States-China relationship will go is in one of two directions. Either we can find, because we, the United States, working with the other free market democracies in the world, stand up to China and demand that China change and play by the same rules that we're playing with. Or it doesn't. And then the United States and China have two very different systems, two very different worlds, and I don't know which is compatible. Now, when Trump thinks about this stuff, he doesn't think about it in these sort of Foreign Policy Institute, Council on Foreign Relations depth of thinking. He sort of gets there instinctively. But the problem that I see as an analyst with China and the United States going forward is the two very different systems. You know, free market capitalism versus state capitalism, where the Chinese government has access to and can demand information and give orders to any company in China, whereas the United States, it's just the opposite. And so are those two economies and two different approaches to life compatible? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I hope for all of our sakes, for the world's sake, for the Korean sake, Japan, United States, everybody, that we can find a way that we are compatible. But that is a very different and very big question. And let's say we're not compatible. Let's say that the Chinese, because they don't feel they need to or they don't want to, they feel that they can continue to access U.S. technology by buying it, by stealing it, by playing very differently by the rules. Let's say that the Chinese think that they're already inevitably the most powerful country in the world, the most powerful economy in the world, the biggest population in the world, potentially the strongest military in the world, and having that kind of economic and military clout can then dictate to the rest of the world the conditions by which they trade. That is the big question of the next 20 years. Can the United States, and not just the United States, but the United States and our bloc, can we coexist with the Chinese with very different systems of government? And I think it's up for grabs. You know, if we had waited 5 years, let's say Hillary Clinton had been president, and she would have continued to not stand up to China, they would have continued to have a strategic patience doctrine with North Korea, and they would more or less have continued where they were and the trajectory we were going on. Then I think 5, 7, 10 years from now, the Chinese would be too powerful to challenge. Their economy would be too large. They would have, militarized, I think, the South China Sea. They would have consumed and dictated the terms by which Middle East oil got to market, and the United States would not be in a position. We would go to conferences, we would make speeches, we would have negotiations, but the Chinese are a ruthless people, and they are not going to be as generous managers of the international community as the United States has been. Look at how they deal with their own people. Look at how they've dealt with Hong Kong. Look at how they deal with their own people, the Muslim majority. They're not going to listen to the interests and demands of the free world if they are in a position to dominate the world economically. So I don't really have an answer as much as I'm throwing out some questions. I know Gordon Chang has written and thought about this in great detail about whether we can live in a world with the Chinese where we are both superpowers with very different systems, or whether the United States needs to go in a different direction. But I just throw that out as thoughts, something to ponder, something to be terrified of if we can't find a way. I don't think the next war is a military war by any means. I think we've kind of gotten over that. But the next war will be a cyber war. It'll be a biological war. It'll be a technology war. It'll be a digital war. And it will be just as devastating, as, if not more, than other wars in our past, which are kinetic wars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had intended actually to ask an additional question about the types of pressure which the U.S. may apply to China, which in turn would pressure the North Koreans to denuclearize because of that, what was once called a lips and teeth relationship between the two countries. But several of the panelists have already very adequately answered that question, so I'd like to shift gears a little bit within the broader topic and focus on the South Korean role in terms of countering the threat of China and North Korea. And I would like to ask the panelists if they believe there is, or if they're concerned by, what some see as a trend of the current South Korean government, the leftist regime of Moon Jae-in, to slightly shift closer to China and perhaps turn more away from the U.S. So I'd like to ask you to comment on that particular issue, please. Beginning with you, Ambassador Chiu.
So the question was?
The question was, are you concerned by, or do you believe that there is a certain danger in the fact that the Moon regime, the leftist Moon regime, either seeks to or has been implementing a policy of slightly shifting more towards China and perhaps away from the alliance with the U.S.?
Well, if you ask Korean people, what do you remember as Chinese actions recently, and they'll probably say, except the coronavirus spread, that's the latest development. But other than coronavirus, they will say that yes, we were subject to rather severe economic retaliation from China because we made a sovereign national security decision to have a missile defense system deployed on the Korean Peninsula, which is entirely within our own right. And Korean people began to see China in a different light since then, because China, some Korean people believed China was a benign power, and can be a benign power, a neighboring country we can work with, like we have been working with the United States. But after this episode, then majority of the Korean people are looking at China in a very, very negative way. So much so that according to one poll taken by the way, American Institute, that ASEAN Policy Institute in Korea, when they asked Korean people whether do you like to align with China, do you like to align with the United States, over 90% said that we like to align with the United States in 10, 20 years' time. Less than 15% say that we may have to align with China. So that's the public opinion, the public opinion situation among the Korean people about China. So I like that. That's one thing. Two more things. One is that Korean people saw that Xi Jinping said to President Trump at Mar-a-Lago that actually Korea was once, for a long time, a territory of China. It didn't make headline news in the United States, but it made a very impactful news in Korea, because Korean people do not believe that was historically correct, and that's really revealing something, how can I put it, maybe sinister about China. Because if you say not correctly that Korea was for a long time part of China, so what does it mean? And it came from the leadership of China, and that has to be taken very seriously, and it's indeed be taken very seriously by many Korean people. And thirdly, last July last year, Chinese and the Russians for the first time conducted joint Air Force exercises in the East Sea. So that's not West Sea, but East Sea, east of the Korean Peninsula. And in the process, actually, Russian plane twice violated airspace over Dokdo Island. And Chinese have this strategy, that is, they have the 3 layers of defense lines called first island chain, second island chain, and third island chain. And first island chain comes from the Korean Peninsula and to the Taiwan. And we do not know, and Chinese have not explained to us that whether this first island chain, this first line of defense for China, actually includes the Korean Peninsula. But given the Chinese aggressive military actions, which are increasing exponentially in latest years, they make many of us wonder that China's intention is actually trying to dominate the Northeast Asia, including the Korean Peninsula. If that's the case, of course, if that's the case, then Korea has to worry about it. And also US has to worry about it because US is our ally. And if China's scheme becomes successful, it's not just a matter for Korea. Japan will be at the front of an advancing China threat. And we are all looking at Chinese actions in the South China Sea. And finally, when the issue of South China Sea came up, I asked the Chinese diplomats and Chinese officials, I really do not understand the nature of China's, legal nature of the China's claim on that vast body of water. Is it legal claim that you are making? Is it any other claim? The answer I got was, it's a historical claim. And when you say it's a historical claim, it is not consistent, I think, with a current contemporary international law. And if China doesn't abide by international law, then ROK really has to worry about China's strategic intentions in the years to come.
Well, I have to say that this panel is the realization of my worst fears. And my worst fear is speaking after Ambassador Cho, because he answers all the questions so well that I don't know what I can add. I think the important thing is, if you look at Moon Jae-in, he is obviously following a policy of No Mo-hyun. Moon was No Mo-hyun's chief of staff. And No Mo-hyun always wanted this policy of balancing, being a balancing force between what they said was the Northern Alliance of China, Russia, North Korea, and the Southern Alliance of Japan and the United States. So Moon has actually, when you look at his foreign policies, he's certainly moved Korea towards China with, for instance, the 3 no's of October 2017, the first year that he was in office. And we've seen this, of course, in a number of other instances. But as Ambassador Cho says, if you look at the events following the outbreak of coronavirus on the Korean Peninsula, it has changed so many dynamics, so many calculuses on the peninsula. And one of them, of course, is China. Because we can remember that China intimidated Korea into not restricting travel between China and Korea. And Moon made those famous words that we and the Chinese are brothers, we have to share their suffering. And because of not closing the border, what we had, of course, is these horrible outbreaks of coronavirus in South Korea, crippling large portions of the country. And that, of course, has led to the call for impeachment, where you have 1,000,001 people, as of 24 hours ago, have signed a petition. It has really changed, as Ambassador Cho said, the political consensus. And this is China. This is affecting people in a very personal way. So I think that going forward, we're going to see that Moon's ability to do what he wants to do, which is to move away from the U.S., move closer to China and Russia, move closer to North Korea, I think will be severely restricted. As the General said, April 15th is a big day. You have all 300 members of the National Assembly up for election. Moon understands that. So I think that we are going to see a much reduced presidency in South Korea, much less able to do the types of mischief that we're all concerned about.
Thank you.
I'll be brief because I want to hear what everyone else has to say, including KT, but I just want to remind everyone in the room what the history of the United States is as it relates. You know, the United States has never been a colonial power. In fact, we have defended freedom around the globe and only asked for enough land to bury our dead in the cemeteries, in those battlefields. And so, you know, I would compare and contrast that to what was described as the alliance of the North of Russia and China and North Korea. And, you know, we, as the United States, are the beacon of freedom. We are always trying to be the shining city on the hill that is an aspirational goal for all people to be free. And so that's, you know, that would be, if you want to pick an ally, I don't know how you wouldn't prefer the United States versus China and Russia.
Thank you.
Yeah, all the questions been addressed very, very well. I just want to add that I want to look at Moon Jae-in as a person. Why is he so enamored by China? Is he enamored, or is he indifference, or is he obsequious? What is it? It's very mysterious, the way Moon Jae-in behaves. We might go back to what he said about who he admires in terms of his thinking, what he bases his. Well, one of the people he admires is his name is Lee Young-hee, and he is very famous for writing about Mao Zedong. He admires what Mao did for China. He likes the cultural revolution that Mao led. And so you can pretty much guess what the way Moon is leaning, why he's leaning towards China. And I've thought about this, in that for a long time. I still can't figure out, like it was said, why did he not restrict travel from China to Korea? I mean, it's an obvious. There's an obvious answer for that, and it's a mystery. But I think in his background, when he was young, he read a lot of stuff by communists. I'll say it. He admires the guy named Shin Young-bok. He's served time in prison for being a anti-state persona non grata. And Moon, he publicly admits all this. So I'm thinking that his makeup, thinking process is definitely leans towards communism. And look at his staff. A lot of them, they're former, what we call Jusapa, which means they are admirers of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, and they used to gather every morning and sing praises of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-un. And he's surrounded by those guys. And so when you look deeper into his motivation, this could explain why he's leaning towards China and away from U.S. This is the what I'm thinking today. I wrote about it. And you might go visit, maybe most of you have, but go visit the booth, and there's some good materials over there for your reference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I be terribly rude having arrived late and now I have to leave early? Could I, but it's a woman's prerogative.
Please do.
Do you mind very much if I go, just say a few words and then I've got to go do my next event? Because I actually have to cover the whole world as far as no, I would just say that as an American who has, and I've said earlier, we have spent the last several, probably decade, trying to change the public opinion in the United States, and I think we've succeeded. That the United States now looks at China differently, we now look at our economy differently. Donald Trump is a very different president than President Obama, and it is a real revolution politically in the United States. If you don't like Moon, if you don't like Moon, go change it. Go out, change your country, because I want to tell you where the world is in about 10 years. Trump, I do believe, will get reelected. I think the American economy will be thriving. I think Trump, in his second term, will take a coalition of capitalists, capital systems, democracies, stand up to the Chinese, and demand a different kind of a relationship. I think that the United States will put an enormous amount of effort into technological development in a second term, like a Manhattan Project, sort of where we will really devote a lot of resources to reclaiming the technological advantage that the United States has had. I think also, if you're looking at the Northern Coalition, look at where China is potentially in 10 years. So, Gordon Chang wrote a book who people at the time said, oh, Gordon Chang, that's a conspiracy theory when he wrote the book, The Coming Collapse of China, but he's been right. And China has had a very nice run for about the last 3 or 4 years, where they've gone to the international organizations, they've gone to various world meetings, and they've pranced around the world saying, we're the model for the world. We're the great nation. We're the model for rapid development and economic development and peace and security, yada, yada, yada. The United States, your days are finished. I mean, those of us who have traveled to China in the last couple of years, it was very clear that the reception that we would get from Chinese leaders to say, basically, America, your day is over. You're finished. You're yesterday's news. We're the world of the future. And I think what's happened in the last year or two, particularly with President Trump, is there's a lot of reassessment of that position. Hong Kong was a dirty, bloody nose for China. China had said to everybody, 2 systems, 1 country, we're going to respect the rights of Hong Kong. Well, they clearly didn't. And if you're in Taiwan, how are you thinking right now? That's a very big black mark on the world stage of a country that was supposed to be leading the world in the future. The second thing is that their economy is slowing. And the United States, with Trump, he is not afraid to use the economic warfare weapon, and he will continue to use it until I think he gets the arrangement and deal that he wants. The next part of it, though, is this coronavirus, and I think that the implications and repercussions are going to live far longer than the virus itself will. And that is that a totalitarian system cannot deal with criticism and change. And when the Chinese have I think foolishly in the long run, perhaps wisely in the short run, while they have let this happen to the world, and who knows what the original origin of this is? It a biological weapon went bad, or is it just bad animal husbandry in China? Who knows? But the fact that they are the source of it and the world is now coping with it, I think all those things together, China is no longer looking like the bright golden boy that it did 3 or 4 years ago. So my encouragement to all of my Korean friends and you've made the trip, you've made the effort, you're activists in your own country, go do what we did. And what we still have to do now that Bernie Sanders has popped up. But you'll have to make the debate. Go in your countries. Convince them of what they have, what they've taken for granted. Your generation, not my generation, your generation has taken for granted democracy, freedom, prosperity, life is getting better. They kind of think it's their birthright. It's not. So go make the case to your own people. Elect a good leader. I'm not going to get into the middle of South Korean or anybody's domestic politics. Go elect the right leader that you think is going to give you a better future. And then we can have a very different relationship going forward, because the United States is eager for that relationship. We are eager for you to stand up as our allies and our friends. We are not going to do it for you, nor should we. You're capable of doing it yourself. Look what Korea's done in the last 30 or 40 years. This has been a miracle the world can't even believe. So continue to do it. Know that you have to fight for freedom in every generation, and go out and do it. And now I'm going to go do my next event. I think I'm going to go take a train.
Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Mcfarland. Thank you. General.
2010 2017년 4월 달에 시진핑이는 마라라고로 가서 트럼프 대통령과 정상회담을 합니다.
In April 2017, Xi Jinping flew to Mar-a-Lago and had a meeting with Donald Trump.
시진핑이는 트럼프 대통령에게 한국은 중국의 일부였다라고 주장을 했습니다.
And she told Trump that Korea used to be and still is a part of the China.
속국이 아니라 일부였다라고 함으로써 중국의 영토임을 분명히 했습니다.
He didn't use the term colonized state. He used the term part of the China. So he was claiming that it is a subjugated territorial land of China.
시진핑의 속셈은 사우스 코리아를 병합하는 것이 속셈임을 분명히 했습니다.
So at that time, she showed his true intent to bring South Korea into, or absorb the South Korea into the system of China.
같은 해 2017년 12월 달에 문재인이는 중국 북경으로 날아가서 다음과 같은 말을 했습니다.
In December 2017, Moon Jae-in flew to Beijing and he said the following.
대한민국과 중국은 동반자 관계이다.
He said South Korea and China are partners.
그리고 공동 운명체다.
And we are on the same vessel as a same equal partner.
그리고 그 이후에 중국 몽을 같이 꾸겠다라고 했습니다.
And he said we'll have a same Chinese dream.
이 말은 문재인의 마음 속에는 한미 동맹을 버렸고 중국과의 동맹 관계를 맺었다는 것을 의미합니다.
So this statement we could deduce that he has lost the hope in the alliance of U.S. and South Korea. Instead, he now is developing a dream of having an alliance between China and South Korea.
지금 코로나 바이러스에 대해서 중국의 이 마스크를 갖다 바치고 장갑을 갖다 바치고 하는 것을 우리가 봅니다.
And we have seen that the Moon administration have supplied a great number of masks and gloves to China because of this coronavirus pandemic.
그리고 재작년 2018년 9월 19일 날 남북 군사 합의서에 조인한 것을 우리가 보았습니다.
And we also remember the military agreement between South Korea and North Korea signed on September 19th, 2018.
우리 대한민국의 현존 병력은 63만 명이고 북한은 117만 명입니다.
As you may know, the number of soldiers in South Korea is 630,000, whereas there are 117,000 soldiers. I'm sorry, 1.1 million soldiers in North Korea.
그런 가운데서도 9.19 군사 합의를 통해서 12만 명을 감축하는 반역적 일을 단행했습니다.
But because of what he had signed on September 19, the President Moon have decided to reduce 120,000 of South Korean soldiers.
따라서 문재인이가 중국을 버리고 미국 편으로 돌아설 일은 절대로 없을 것입니다.
And I don't believe that the President Moon will turn away from China and work with the United States.
따라서 문재인 제거만이 답이고 방금 한국민들이 문재인이를 제거해야만 된다라고 하는 얘기로 제가 들었습니다.
So the only solution we have is to bring Moon Jae-in down from the power and office, and that would be the only solution that South Korea people will have.
고든창 선생님께서는 문재인이가 북한의 간첩일 수 있다라고 한 적이 있습니다.
I remember Gordon Chang say that Moon Jae-in could be the mole or the agent of North Korea.
저는 백악관 앞에서도 청와대 앞에서도 문재인은 시진핑의 간첩이고 김정은의 간첩이다라고 선포한 바가 있습니다.
I personally have declared in front of the White House and the Blue House that the Moon Jae-in is the mole and the agent of Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un.
따라서 문재인이가 친미로 돌아설 일은 없다는 것을 갖고 정책을 수립해야 될 것으로 조언합니다.
So I'd like to ask the American policymakers to come up with many useful policies, knowing that the Moon Jae-in will never be a pro-American. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to some audience questions, I'd just like to ask our distinguished panelists if they have any final or concluding remarks that they'd like to make. Beginning with you, Master.
The alliance is very, very important for the Republic of Korea. And we only have one ally, that's the United States. And so I think both governments should value the alliance and take actions to strengthen the alliance. We have heard problems with Moon Jae-in government. I don't have to repeat that, but yes, we have problems with Moon Jae-in government. And we have some rhetorical problems sometimes with Trump administration because we have some perception in the Republic of Korea, not among the leftist or progressive, but wider audience than that wider public than that perhaps the Trump administration approached the alliance issue through a transactional viewpoints a little too much. And these are gathering of friends. So I believe that I can be very frank and I can ask for a cooperation from our American friends. So we're going to have, as Katie said the other day, the two governments have so many alliance issues, alliance management issues, but issues will be dealt with and issues will be worked out, no problems. But we have more fundamental problems like threat perception. I believe that current Korean government has to do something about the threat perception issue and do the right messaging about it, yes. I also hope that Trump administration, US government will perhaps say a little more that alliance indeed is important and important to the United States. It's a kind of message that can be very important to the wider Korean public. So I ask that perhaps the U.S. policymakers and the U.S. public opinion leaders will say more often that alliance is important and ROK is important, and U.S. expects ROK to cooperate more with the United States. Thank you.
Thank you.
All of the panelists have talked about the critical importance of freedom and democracy and how the freedom and democracy is the common denominator that binds Korea and the United States. If I could just go field just a little bit, the general did mention April 15th, the National Assembly election. You would think because Moon is so unpopular that he would fail to hold his majorities in the National Assembly because his Democratic Party of Korea is the largest party, and especially when you consider the affiliated leftist parties. They hold almost 2/3 of the seats. 2/3 is really critical because the South Korean Constitution provides that an amendment of the Constitution will be sent to a referendum of the people of South Korea if that amendment receives at least 2/3 majority. And we're very close to that 2/3 line. We know that Moon Jae-in, from all of his public statements of talking about unification of North and South Korea, and from what we have just heard from the general, this means the end of the alliance and moving South Korea, North Korea in a unified state towards China and indeed Russia. Because Moon Jae-in, the referendum of the people is only a 50% vote for approval, which means that Moon, because he's counting the votes, will get that 50% come hell or high water. So this April 15th election is absolutely critical. This could be the last election in South Korea. And since this is the Political Action Conference, this is, as KT said, a time for Koreans to mobilize themselves to save their democracy, because this could very well be the last chance.
Thank you.
Well, that's pretty dire, Gordon.
Dire, but possible.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's likely.
No,
I'm just saying it's possible.
And it's a really a call to action that all freedom-loving South Koreans do their part. And this is one of the messages as I travel around this country, and was lucky to visit the Republic of Korea earlier this year, or actually last year.
For KCPAC.
Yeah, for KCPAC. But I mentioned, and I mention this everywhere I go, and that is sort of I don't sit here as someone at the end of my career that's telling you sort of my wisdom and sort of all the things that I've learned throughout my life in the federal government and as a private citizen in the United States and as a candidate for federal office. I tell this as an activist, somebody that is participating today to win state houses and U.S. representative seats, U.S. Senate races, and participating in this presidential race. I would say the message is to join us in this fight, to join us in this effort, and if you think that you're doing all you can, get out of your comfort zone and do more. One of the things that I have promised my friends back in Iowa, my home state, is that one of the reasons I've run statewide in Iowa is because I don't like knocking on doors. But I've promised I'm going to go back in October and I'm going to knock on doors in Iowa and I'm going to talk to voters and I'm going to convince them why our vision, the conservative vision for the future, is much better for people all over the United States, all over the state of Iowa, and all over the world. I mean, I look at my 19-year-old daughter Allison here, and I know that one of the reasons I fight so hard every day to make this country realize its full potential is that so her future can be as bright as it is today. I mean, we are one generation, I mentioned this morning, we are one generation from losing it all. And I think in the Republic of Korea, it may be even less than that. It may be on the cusp, as Gordon points out. This may be the inflection point in your nation's history as to what direction you go. And I know that I'm going to fight to my last breath because even if I sacrifice my time and my effort, that is not as much as the founding fathers of this republic put on the line to establish the United States of America. They pledged their fortunes and their sacred honor. And they said, if we don't hang together, we will surely hang separately. And just remember that that is the price that our forefathers were willing to pay. And we should be able to get outside a little bit of our comfort zone and do as much as we can to make sure that we retain what we have been given by our fathers and mothers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for that great comment. I was really moved by Vice President Pence's remark yesterday. I thought it was a very brilliant frame, actually, when he said, freedom versus socialism. And it was, oh my God, I think he's talking about, well, not just America, but the rest of the world, especially Korea, South Korea, and also North Korea. And there are people in North Korea that really, they're thirsty for freedom. And there are about 30,000 defectors or refugees in South Korea, and they all talk to their families back in North Korea, and they've tasted, they don't know what freedom is all about, but they've heard of what it is, and certainly 30,000 defectors, they know about it. And Vice President Pence, you know, I think he hit the nerve. I mean, he came up with a formula for not just America, but for the rest of the world. And I think we can apply this philosophy for Hong Kong, Taiwan, the Korean Peninsula, and wherever else we need freedom. And America has to be the leader. I want to say that. Koreans have to do their part, but the American leadership is very crucial as the freedom fighter all over the world. And I hate to put it on Washington or the policymakers, but you know, they really got to look at what they're doing. The best value America can present to the rest of humanity is democracy. And it has to be the leader in democracy, and people will follow. I think Hong Kong people have shown that, and like Ambassador Cho said, people of South Korea, they don't want leadership from America, and we should provide it as much as we can, and we have to be more proactive. That's my comment. Thank you.
저는 젊어서 전투기 조종사로 생활을 했습니다.
When I was younger, I was a fighter jet pilot.
매 순간마다 한미 동맹 속에서 살았습니다.
And I lived and breathed the alliance of the United States and South Korea on a daily basis.
전투 기동을 할 때도 미군 조종사들과 함께 대한민국 영공 수호를 위해서 날랐습니다.
And I flew and protected the land of South Korea alongside with the United States pilots right next to me.
장군이 되어서도 제 마음 속에는 대한민국 대통령과 미국 대통령이 함께 공존했습니다.
When I became a general, I served both the President of South Korea and President of the United States.
1954년도에 한미 상호 방위 조약에 의해서 우리는 미국 대통령도 한국의 방위를 위해서 함께 수고하시는 분이다라고 하는 인식을 갖고 살았습니다.
Because I had a belief that the United States President is here to protect and work with us based on the ROK-US Mutual Defense Treaty that was signed in 1954.
작년 1월부터 트럼프 대통령은 베네수엘라 내정에 간섭하기 시작했습니다.
January 2019, and since then, Donald Trump got involved with Venezuela.
베네수엘라 국민들을 사랑하기 때문입니다.
I think he did it because he loved the people in Venezuela.
트위터로 마두로는 베네수엘라의 대통령이 아니다. 과이도가 대통령이다.
He even tweeted that Guaido is the president of the Venezuela, not Maduro.
올해 2월 4일 연두 교서를 발표할 때 트럼프 대통령은 베네수엘라의 국회의장인 과이도를 단상에 모셔놓고 저분이 베네수엘라의 대통령이다라고 선언했습니다.
At the State Union on February 4th, 2012, the Donald Trump Act
2020.
2020. He even brought the Guaido to the Capitol and introduced him in front of all American people.
저는 트럼프 대통령님과 트럼프 행정부, 의회에 다음과 같이 요청합니다.
I'd like to make a humble request to the President Trump and the Congress of the United States as following.
재작년 2018년 9월 19일 남북 군사 합의로 대한민국의 방위를 헐어버리고 한미 동맹을 헐어버린 문재인에 대한 규정입니다.
규정. So I'd like to ask you, American leadership, to come up with the remedy or remedial plans because of the collapsed or deteriorating the alliance between the United States and South Korea based on the signing of the North Korea-South Korea military agreement signed on September 19, 2018.
문재인은 더 이상 대한민국의 대통령이 아니다.
the declaration would include or should include the president is Moon Jae-in is no longer the president of South Korea.
사기 탄핵으로 감옥에 가 있는 박근혜 대통령 복귀를 지지한다.
And we support the reinstatement of Park Geun-hye, who has been incarcerated based on the falsified and illegal impeachment.
이상입니다.
That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's have a big hand for all of our participants. Thank them for coming out today. Appreciate it very much. Gordon, unfortunately, has another engagement. He's not able to stay for questions, so we'll excuse Gordon from the panel before the question and answer, but we thank him as we thank all of our distinguished participants.
Thank you.
We'll go to questions now. If any of you in the audience do have a question, and I would appreciate it if it is structured in the form of a question rather than a long comment, please identify yourself and stand up to the microphone.
I'm Michael Wan, politics editor for Korea Daily. My question is, I wanted to know what's going on right now currently about the South China Sea situation, the most recent update. Do you have any in the panel? What's going on there?
Anyone who
Answers for that.
중국해에서 지금 어떤 일을 하나?
Taking a question about the South China Sea situation.
Protect person who can answer question just left. I think perhaps thank you for the question, and I'm no expert for a South China Sea, so my answer would not be complete. But in South China Sea, as you know, the China claims this 9-dash line, the line that's dotting 9 points. And that actually covers over 90% of the body of water. And as I said, China would not talk about the nature of their claims. That makes many of us very concerned. And so that going on. And the United States is responding very strongly by conducting the freedom of navigation, the voyages, very close to the islands held by China. And U.S. and U.S. vessels and Chinese vessels, U.S. planes and Chinese planes sometimes come very close to within hundreds of yards. And this is going on. But from Korea's standpoint, what is important is that South China Sea is a channel of transport, the essential of essential interest to my country, because we in Korea there is not one drop of oil is produced, so we are dependent on the oil and gas, whole of that. From abroad, and over 80%, I think, of our energy supply is coming through that water, and it is essential in the interest of ROK that this freedom of navigation and free the transport through these body of waters be guaranteed and maintained, and U.S. efforts actually are trying to make sure that really is going on. So this is very, very important operations from the perspective of ROK as well. So that's going on. What is concerning is that while U.S. is doing these freedom of navigation operations to challenge China's claims, and that's very important. However, what China is doing is actually making facts on the ground. They're making facts on the water, rather. So they militarize the islands they are holding. So once it is done, it will turn into a Chinese military basis. While U.S. operations are transient in nature. Basically, it just goes in a couple of days and come back maybe the next month, but Chinese bases are there, not going anywhere. So the whole strategic situation is kind of concerning. If in down the line, in 20 years' time, China's military bases will get strengthened and then going nowhere, working almost like a stationary the airplane carrier, while the U.S. is trying to challenge the China's claims. One different assessment comes from a military officers I've talked to, and that is, well, China is actually consolidating its positions on the islands, okay, but when time comes, actually these can become a stationary targets as well. So this is, I think, give and take situation, but it's not sufficiently reported in Korean press, but I believe that this is an issue really very close to our hearts and to our interests.
I'm sorry, we only will have time for one very, very brief question additionally. If there's anyone else who has one, please step up. If not, we will then conclude the panel. And once again, please thank our distinguished panelists for their excellent contribution.